So, Pia and Justin, thank you so much for coming into the Koreo headquarters today. So what we wanted to do is just talk about your submission to the Koreo Prize. When we last spoke, you had like really beautiful rationale behind what motivated you to do it and kind of the design of it and where you see it going in the future. So could you speak a little bit first about what your submission actually is?
Our submission is called Reacquainting Sensibility, and it's a project about how to tackle gender inequality through space.
I guess we sort of arrived at this project actually based on a project that we did in school. So we sort of had to do a podcast for our Basque program. And then we sort of came together and we were trying to explore certain ideas that we had to approach from an interdisciplinary framework. So we came in and we were like, okay, why don't we try to explore things about gender and like urbanism. And so that was really like how we started off on like the idea. But I think as we went along, like the initial concept changed quite differently.
Yeah, the moment we started researching, we knew that Koreo Prize was about kind of making a creative project as a response to one of these topics. But we kind of didn't impose what it was going to be. Initially, we didn't know it was going to be an installation. So we just kind of delved into the subject and let that kind of take us to actually the final project. And initially, I always think that kind of we find quotes that really kind of resonate with a feeling or kind of a view that you have. And the moment we started looking into gender, we realized how gender itself is a social construction. So it's like, oh, how to tackle gender inequality without making it about gender. And the side on urbanism, well,
I think it's just the idea of space in general. It's like not something that people really think about, I guess. Like in our everyday lives, like, you know, you sort of have like rooms, roads and things like that, but I think because you're sort of like so well integrated into like your physical environment, you don't really think about how it actually consciously shapes like your decisions, like maybe like a route that you take in particular and things like that. So we thought it would be interesting to sort of tie these two things together, like things that we're so conditioned to, especially from like a behavioral perspective as well.
This is a multimedia submission as it stands now. Can you talk me through your sort of how you came about choosing these quotes and then the film and how that kind of came together?
So the first one we have is gender is not one is not born a woman but rather becomes a woman, by Simone de Beauvoir from 1949. So already within that is like you become a woman through society. So then how can you kind of fight against that? And it's like that's when the performative aspect of gender comes in, and how kind of gender is almost like it's a body appearance, because men, without knowing, through gender identity, they behave and they move a certain way, and women do the same. So that's when we're like, oh, performance in space. How kind of do you respond to a space without it being gendered? So and then again we found another quote of Judith Butler, who was kind of explaining this performative aspect of gender as a stylized repetition of acts, and how because of that it's like there's a social temporality to that. So if there is a social temporality to that, well, hopefully through time you can also kind of shape it differently. So that's when we were like, okay, this would be interesting as a space where people get involved and move. and just kind of move without any kind of preconception of what you have to do. So kind of just like responding to a space. So we knew the space had to be quite like influencing in a way, like quite dynamic. And the reason why we decided to use multimedia is because we didn't really have time and all the production and knowledge to construct the space.
So we sort of wanted to do sort of like an abstraction of what we envisioned the piece to be. So I think we sort of played around with like textures and like how you can focus on different things with it actually being like the same object, and like how movement and like sort of your environment and like music and all that sort of ties into an experience of something, which is I think ultimately what we want to convey with the space that we're having.
And that's very much reflected in the film, isn't it? With your rock and the papers and like the transparency. Can you kind of tease out that, like, did you chose those objects for a reason, right?
So we chose the kind of the papers because we had been thinking of actually the construction of the physical installation and what we would like it to seem like, and we were thinking, oh, it would be really nice if people had to kind of like bend down a little bit and go into a space in comparison to maybe just walking into a gallery, because already that kind of set like changes a little bit your mindset, you know, like almost like taking your shoes and going in. That's already like, okay, I'm in another world separate from the one outside. So we were able to do this structure with a paper that kind of looked like an igloo and had many textures. There is something about textures that is kind of reacquainting with sensibility, you know, and I think it's all about becoming more sensible. So it's almost like going back to kind of really feeling certain things as you do the textures. And then the stone.
Yeah. We actually, we were in like because we knew we wanted to play with something that had different textures, different colors. So we actually went to this mineral store and we sort of like exploring the place and see like what we could find. And like most of the stuff there are actually like quite expensive as well, because especially those were like the proper minerals and crystals, and they're all like really big. And then we chanced upon this, it's called the sand rose, I think, and then it just so happened that the store owner was telling us about how the sand rose comes about, like it forms naturally in the desert. It's the shape and the material comes from the way like the wind and the rain sort of comes together in the desert, and we thought that was like a really beautiful idea that we were trying to explore as well. So like, yeah, this is it. And then we bought it, and then we went back, and then we just sort of had to like experiment with the sound, the lights, and yeah, it was a really fun process for both of us as well, because it was the first time that we ever did anything like this.
Yeah, we had a macro lens to film it, but then at the end we didn't use it.
Yeah.
But we had like, or whether I or whether Justin kind of running from one side to the table, or with like the lamp.
Yeah, so like we're like holding like this lamp and like.
Because also playing with the light kind of changed the shape of these stone and the paper, and also because we do envision this installation with visuals, just because we work through visuals much more than anything else, I think. So you can very easily kind of just travel to another reality through visuals.
So you've got, is it 6 quotes? Yeah,
yes.
Sort of a number of quotes.
Yes, and a poem. So this apparently, yeah, and we have this poem as well. That the reason why we chose it is because we felt it really kind of gave a sense of what we wanted to kind of portray with this video. That is by a poet called Roberto Juarez, and this is only the translation. It isn't about speaking or remaining silent. It's opening an area between the words and silence. Perhaps when all's transpired, the words and silence also, that zone will remain open like a backwards hope. And that inverted sign perhaps can be a point of focus, and this limitless mutism where we're palpably sinking. So opening an area that is almost between the nothing, the nothing and between the everything. You know, those moments that you don't say anything, but there wasn't a silence, but there was so much more that's kind of unexplainable.
Yeah, like space is, I guess, an opening to experience and like opportunities. Like I think we don't really view like physical space as something that's dynamic. Like I think we have a very static conception of what space is like. You know, like if it's a room, it's just four walls. But you don't really think about like how these four walls sort of like, okay, if there are four walls, means that I can't walk past something, or I have to be in this particular space. So we thought it'd be nice to sort of construct an experience within a space.
And in all of that, with gender inequality, and how the space would then remove that or tackle it, what would be unique about the space that you would create that would challenge these constructions of gender?
So we sort of wanted to come into a space whereby, well, we didn't want to use the word ungendered because it's such a big concept as well, and we didn't really want to assume like anything about it. But I think what we sort of envisioned was a space whereby you come in without any preconceptions of what you have to do, and then through that experience, you sort of, well, because in our code we mentioned about how like gender is the stylized repetition of acts. So we thought through like movement and things like that, just making you do something, but not necessarily consciously thinking about whether it's like gendered or anything, that might encourage you to explore things that you might not necessarily do in everyday life. Yeah.
So ideally we wanted people to be wearing headphones. And a new idea that kind of has evolved since we first met is that there'd be three different channels maybe on the headphones, so that you choose what channel you want to hear. One is kind of just a set of instructions that kind of leaves you to kind of move your body a certain way. So lift your arms or do whatever, and you already have like a group of people kind of conjointly collaborating in this almost like game. And then also people that if they just want to respond to the space through music, they can do as well. And then maybe a third channel for people that normally need to kind of understand something in order to join in, you know. But like sometimes you need to like, you're like, okay, this is all fine, people are having a wonderful time in this space and they're dancing, but what is this all about? And maybe once you understand it and you're like, okay, this is just about you forgetting who you are, and maybe just kind of, if you feel like lying down on the floor for 5 minutes, you're allowed, or like crawling into a little ball, and then all of a sudden you are very vulnerable, because we don't do that in a public space, you know. It's almost like you behave appropriately. So yeah, that were headphones, and the kind of the scary aspect of performance or something like that is that you can kind of imagine how people could respond, but at the end that it would kind of be an exploration of itself, because we don't know how people would kind of respond to it. We can only hope that, well.
So having reached a point where you've got a really crafted idea and quite a clear vision as to its progression, and the physical submission that we have in front of us now is very much like the sort of metaphor, if you will, for the larger event, right? So for people who are coming to the Koreo Prize fresh and thinking about maybe how to approach it, like what would you say would be firstly maybe some advice that you'd give to people starting out on a project, and then also things which you found, what have you learned from it, I guess?
I think it's really about collaboration. I think that was really like quite an underlying theme in our work. Like throughout the process, we're always calling like random friends about certain expertise that they might have. So like She has a friend that was a sound engineer, and then I have a friend that's an architecture student. So just about, bringing in all these things and sort of tying in all these concepts, I think that would be a good step. Like, don't really be afraid to ask people for help, really. And they bring in sort of like fresh insights and perspectives. Like, oh, like look at this way, and then suddenly we go in like a whole other direction because of that one comment on one aspect of the project. I thought that was really exciting.
Yeah, and kind of not to impose the creative aspect of the prize. I think the creative aspect of the prize is what makes it so wonderful, because all these issues are kind of completely separated with creativity, and kind of we are creative by nature because we're emotional by nature. And so I think kind of, you decorate something for your Mother's Day or whatever, so kind of not imposing it. I mean that, like, just delving into the subject, I'd recommend start researching, and then something will kind of arise if it's about like the housing crisis. Well, you're definitely already looking at like architecture, and kind of you can kind of already like go and visit like council estates, and what is it about that? It's quite communal actually, which is really nice in comparison to like posh big houses. So I think kind of not feeling pressurized of having to be artistic or creative, and that the subject in itself is already creative.
So why did you choose gender equality of the 6, which I can remind you of? So we've got food security, social mobility, community resilience, social housing, well-being, and then gender equality. So what was it about? Did you have an idea that gender was something you wanted to explore, or was it more like it just kind of came to you in that quite organic process that you just described?
I think it's one very relevant to me, like my personal struggle of being a woman and sometimes not wanting to be a woman, but then having a lot of pleasure being so as well, and before you know it, you kind of fall into certain like patterns through like gender identity. So I remember when I started having a boyfriend, I was like, oh my god, I'm becoming this woman. I'm becoming like all of my girlfriends. I never thought I'd be like this, but I actually do want to cook for him, and I don't mind like watching, and I was like, no. And then I'm very like, I need to fight against that, because there is a tendency for me to do that more than for him to do that. So I think it's a struggle that everyone can have, no matter what gender you are. It's more about the person you've kind of become.
Yeah, for me, I guess it's really personal as well. Like it's quite weird, like how this sort of resonates. It's like, because I'm like new to London, and like this is like a very different place from where I came from. So I guess like gender has always been something that I've been negotiating, but here more than ever, I think I have sort of like the opportunity to really explore like what it means to me, I guess. And there is quite a performative aspect for me, like today that I put on like eyeliner and I'm like a different person. Today I tie up my hair, like I feel like a different person. So I guess just sort of like inhabiting all these different maybe like characters of some sort. So I thought that's why I think maybe this concept came quite naturally to us, I guess.
And it's quite freely, it gives a lot of freedom. Gives a lot of freedom to kind of see it as a kind of almost as a performance, because then you kind of discover so many aspects of yourself, like in the same way that people behave so differently in a costume, in a dress-up party. Like if that day you feel like just feeling a little bit stronger and like wearing that bold coat that you have, you kind of carry it with a different like persona nearly, like you don't necessarily need to be confined to like, oh no, because I'm the very shy quiet one, so I can't speak to people. It's like, no, you can kind of discover any part of you through this kind of performative aspect.
Absolutely. So within all of that, and there is so much richness and so much texture and thinking behind it, the Koreo Prize is positioned in relation to the UN's global goals. So the 6 issues that it tackles are the most pressing for UK society. So I guess we touched on it in the last question a bit, but how would you relate your project to kind of wider issues of gender equality? How would you make a project like this accessible to the wider public, to kind of address people who maybe aren't of the sort of gallery going demographic, but have as much to learn, if not more, if not it being more important for a wider audience?
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's really just about changing attitudes. I guess maybe that's like the access point. Like it's just coming in with whatever preconceptions you might have, and then you come to this space, and then you sort of have this experience, and then maybe it's something that you talk about the next day, maybe it's something you think about in the next month or so, but hopefully this is something that is just sort of like an experience that you can always keep with you, I guess. Like just having tried like something new, maybe like someone's like really shy, and then like in this space suddenly you have the opportunity to like dance, and like it's something that you always wanted to do, but you always feel like inhibited or something. So I think like it doesn't necessarily like restrict to like people who only go to galleries. I think maybe you can see it as more like a public space, like just like a bit like a playground really, like you get to try something new and like have people that you don't necessarily know either.
Yeah, like a public space, like it could be anywhere. I guess it kind of feels more like in a gallery because of the aesthetics of the video. But it would be really interesting to explore it as just like something that you can take anywhere. That's more like the concept of like, even if it's like in a park or at the top of a mountain or like Hampstead Heath, or whatever, just kind of having people with headphones just kind of go into another world. So yeah,
lovely. That's really great. That's really, really interesting to hear you guys talk about it, because the submission is kind of in an intermediary state. So that's lovely. What do you think? What like attracted to you to the Koreo Prize, and what do you think? Like, why do you think it's important? Do you think it's important, full stop, for a space like this to be created? And what motivated you to apply?
I'd say kind of the openness of the prize and the freedom within it. Nothing is imposed. It's just like you lead the way, which is always very like exciting for anyone. You're not being told what to do. You're just almost like someone look this way, and you're like, oh yeah, there's loads of things over there, and you get super excited. That and the fact that I do think that young people nowadays have like just a different way to relating to issues, because they don't already come maybe with like a whole like intellectual baggage on a subject. So it can be quite like eye-opening. So I think it's amazing that it's being open to like such a like an incredible range of young creatives or students studying whatever. To
just like the flexibility. I remember like during the submission period, we're like, oh, can we submit a video? With the video, can we submit like some text? And then he was like, yeah, sure. And then we're just like, okay, then we'll put something together, sort of thing.
Does it have to be 20 minutes of video? No, it can be whatever. It was like, there you go, it's just because there is not such a structure that kind of molds what it has to be.
Yeah.
You're able to shape it yourself.
Applications are now open, so for more information check out our website.